Hello. My name is Nick McHenry, and right before coronavirus hit, I had the pleasure of sitting down with a very good friend of mine, James Mastrantonio. James has worked for the likes of Valentino and Giorgio Armani, both as a salesperson on the floor in the monobrand boutique and as a brand manager managing the wholesale business in the stores and then growing those businesses year over year. Throughout our conversation, we touched on so many important topics that I think both apply before Corona and after, such as getting back to basics, how you can build your business by building relationships and personal connection with customers on the floor, even people you just met, and many other really fascinating topics around how to succeed as a luxury salesperson in today's retail environment. I really hope you enjoy the conversation. I know I got a ton out of it. So here we go. Oh, really quick, as always, if you want to get more content, more interviews, more conversations, hit the subscribe button. Now, let's get into it. I am here with fashion aficionado, seller extraordinaire, James Mastrantonio, who has a storied career across, many of the major fashion brands that define what fashion is today. And we're going to talk about, what it takes to succeed in the current retail environment on a luxury sales floor. So thanks for being here, James.
It's my pleasure.
Why don't you just get started and tell me, I gave you an introduction there, but tell me a little bit more about where you came from,
Sure.
How you ended up where you are today.
My initial fashion career began with Valentino. It was the very first job I had in the fashion business. It's a long story, but I was in LA working as an actor, and a woman I met at a cocktail party said, do you need a job? And I said, no, I'm working as an actor. She said, come and see me tomorrow, which I did, and that was a 20-year plus career. And in that process, I got to work with one of the premier designers in the world. And it was in a store initially that had multiple brands. And then I was eventually evolved into the boutique itself with just a mono brand. But I got to meet a lot of people who buy beautiful clothes. And with Mr. Valentino, we had ready to wear, and we had couture as well. And when you say couture with Valentino, you genuflect, because it was really a spectacular experience. And while it wasn't my prime occupation, I had clients, especially from Las Vegas, who were opening casinos, and they just wanted the premier pieces. So that was my understanding of that. And as I got more involved in tenure, I started going to the buy, which for Mr. Valentino was in Paris. There was the show, which was the Grand Poobah experience, Fashion Week in Paris. And then the best experience was in the showrooms afterward. We got to really see the clothes. The models were up front. We could touch the fabrics. We could see actually what worked and what didn't work. We got to understand that just in the process. Fast forward to 2011, the CEO of Valentino moved to Giorgio Armani, and he was kind enough to invite me, and I embarked on the wholesale career, which was terrific because I got to immerse myself in the luxury of Giorgio Armani women's clothing. And then my assignments were always in department stores where Giorgio Armani had a boutique. So for instance, in New York, where my primary career was, I was at the trifecta of fashion, Barney's, Bergdorf's, and Saks. So I got not only to learn about how our clothes operated in those boutiques, but how they operated in relationship to the other big names in the fashion business. The client that bought Armani buys Chanel, buys Acris, buys Loro Piano. So learning product knowledge and customer knowledge at the same time, that kind of condenses my career up to date.
So you kind of skimmed across something interesting I want to go back to. So when you were in LA, You said a lot of your core clientele were in Las Vegas.
Yes, I had, because of the close proximity, a lot of Las Vegas people came, owners of casinos' wives, and the people who worked for them as well.
And they just happened to, come to Rodeo Drive and pop into the store?
Rodeo Drive is only 3 blocks long. And the best part, I would say, is a block and a half. And what it is in Los Angeles, shopping is an activity. In New York, a woman shops on her own and she doesn't want her husband there. She doesn't want her boyfriend there. It's a private activity. But in Los Angeles, it's a couples thing. So if people are traveling to Los Angeles, they might stay at the Wilshire or one of the hotels on Sunset, and they visit stores. And once you get to meet them and establish a relationship with them, and I think it's the word trust. That's a word you use a lot, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that what happened over time, I would meet someone and I would envision you, the client, in an outfit or something that I thought might work for you after just a few sentences. And with time, I got better at it. And then if someone visits once and was happy, they visit again and again. And then I established a lot of relationships with people where I would send clothes to them once I met you. Mrs. Jones, this is a piece that reminds me of you. May I send it? And then with the advent of cell phones, it was easy to send a picture. And women are set up for it or not. They are okay about you sending clothes. They might have staff to unpack it and put it on a rack, or maybe a business executive who it doesn't have staff. But they liked the idea because they were always kept what was current. And that was I would say more than half of my business was mail order.
More than half of your business was pure consignment.
61% to be exact.
Wow.
Because the traffic of Rodeo Drive is not like Fifth Avenue or wild and heavy. And when you're in one brand store, not like a department store, the traffic is even lighter.
So how much at that time, if 61% of your business was consignment or sent out, how much was a local Los Angeles client? How much was, you said Las Vegas, many times where they're traveling. How much was transient?
Sure. Well, I would say that probably about 25% of my business was transient. People that were just walking down the street and would come into a store because they knew it was Valentino and there was a product that they liked. And then the local yokels, the people that I did business with on a regular basis, developed relationships where I tried not to do just special event. I tried to explain to them that I needed to see them at the beginning of the season, and let's just organize what we like, what's in the budget. Obviously, when you're dealing with a high-end client, there are limitations. There are some people that have them, and I respect that. So this is a good time to mention sale, when clothes get discounted. In a store like Valentino, they just do 40% and that's it. Many other department stores bring it down. But I advise my clients, now that I have left the actual retail environment, when they see a store that they like or a salesperson that they can relate to, I think one of the ways they introduce themselves with their business card or their personal card is, I am a sale customer, and hand them your card, your personal card. Please call me when sale happens.
Right.
And if it's a good salesperson, they're going to make sure that they call you for that. But while you're in the store, may I show you this? This piece may not go to sale. That was my operation, the way I operated. And I have to say, I was honest about that. I knew some things would never make it to sale.
Did you see, honestly, I don't hear that very often. Did you see other sales associates in your career extending their client base, let's say, to sale customers versus non-sale customers?
No, I saw your face light up when I said it like it was a novelty. And I think a lot of my career, I have to brag about it to you, was novel. And those were things that I thought of because I put myself in those people's shoes. If I went shopping in a retail store, because I worked in the fashion business, I would get discounts from my designer, but I certainly always explained that I was a sale customer when I walked in the door.
Right.
And I could separate the wheat from the chaff. The good salesperson remembered me.
But you did, because you're a very high touch, high service associate, even for the sale customer, you would give them the same, again.
Well, let me just say this to you. The sale customer needs more care because dollars are different.
Right.
And I understood this relatively early on in my career. And there were some people that would not come into the store unless it was sale. I couldn't tempt them no matter what. So I think reading your customer, respecting your customer, and figuring out what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the important aspects, I think. And a good salesman knows this instinctively, whether she's selling cars, whether she's selling tabletop, whether she's selling fine clothing or fine jewelry.
I mean, completely agree. It's definitely, I mean, luxury fashion has its nuances, but a lot of things you're saying, I mean, definitely apply to definitely any luxury retail environment for sure.
Well, I think that part of the trust and the relationships I developed with people were, I never just discussed clothing. I was interested in what they were doing, nothing intimate,
Mm-hmm.
but if they were interested in Arabian horses, if they were interested in collecting cards or, something special about them.
And what did you do with that information?
Well, I read the New York Times and the LA Times every single day. And I would just go through it like this. I would pick out the articles I wanted to read, but I had a scissors in my hand. Because by the time I had between, I would say 75 and 100 people that I could remember those sorts of details, I like to clip articles out, put it in an envelope, and not even with a note. I thought you would enjoy seeing this. Because how many times does a client get a personal mail, number one? Number two, how many times does a client get personal mail where you're not asking for something? It's about what you're offering, not what you're asking for. And that's what made the difference, I think, in my relationship with people.
And I mean, that's absolutely amazing. I know I would love to get something in the mail that was reflecting something like that. But I mean, how much of that did they write you back? Did they come back to the store and say, "Oh my God, I got your note," or was it more
I
just?
must say this to you. I don't know that I could measure it that way.
Okay.
But I could measure it in loyalty. And then I had a CEO who worked for Valentino who left, and I found out that he was discussing this at staff meetings. He's using it as a technique. And at the same time, I don't know how successful or unsuccessful they were with it, but it resonated with him. He understood what a great, honest, and full of integrity communication that is. I also have to say, truthfully, I was interested in what they were doing, and I loved the idea of connecting them to more information.
I mean, I love that, James, seriously, because I there's one thing to be interested, on the sales floor. We've both been there. It's all about hitting your numbers and,
Yes.
What's your ROI, your KPI, all this other, metrics that we go off of in retail. But at the end of the day, you said it perfectly. Actually caring is a completely different realm than
What you just said, describing the what's fraught about retail right now. I think that a lot of stores are drowning in data, and I think they're collecting or making their staff collect data. There's something called reach out, where they're forcing people to go through names that have not visited the store. I think that is important. I think but it has to be selective.
right.
And I think that every salesperson has to start with one customer. I remember when I landed at Valentino in my very early days, I was a bit green, but I did find a lot of interest in the client. And I could take a client from selling her a scarf to eventually selling her suit or what other lifestyle stuff she needed. But it was all a process. And I think that's what's missing when you're just collecting data. You're not focused on what the client's needs are. You're focused on some kind of measurement,
Right.
and I think you miss something.
And in that quantification of the customer, sub-labeling them, figuring out what the value is to the company, it just gets muddied, you would say.
Yes, and I think it's a little bit too much time is spent on it, as opposed to just a little softer sell. Are you visiting New York?
Right.
It's so nice to meet you. Let them have a little space without asking so much about gathering their data.
So in that method of almost like the soft sell, as you put it, I mean, how much of that in your career did you have small purchases end up being lifetime customers? Did you have no purchases being lifetime customers?
Well, I think that you have to ask a question related to that. What's my day going to be like when I'm selling here today? Is this going to be just driven? Am I going to just be concerned about the numbers that my boss says I have to have by the end of the week or by today? There's a lot of sale events or specific events. And I think if you could just remove yourself from that, I know my number is 50,000 for the week. How am I going to get to that? and it's going to be fun and it's going to be positive, and I'm going to make sure that everybody enjoys it on both sides, because the moment you're holding on too tight, the client understands.
Right.
They choose who they want to work with. They can pick and read right away how you're relating to them. And the last thing you want to communicate is you want them to buy something.
No, I mean, absolutely. Do you think that, I mean, everything that you're saying is rooted in, traditional, almost like core tenets of luxury retail? From like when you came into the business until now, obviously a lot has changed.
Big changes, sure.
Like, how do you feel like that's, caused you to look at the business or changed your actions? Obviously you're grounded in these, core principles, but have you adjusted them at all? Or
Yes, I think I'm more surgical now
Okay.
than I've ever been. I think that people's time windows and bandwidths for selecting clothes and shopping has really narrowed. So I like to think that I'm the short division salesman or the short division advisor now. What exactly are your needs? I'm going to ask you for a little water.
Yeah, of course.
Aren't you going to have some?
Yeah. I will have some, as a matter of fact.
You can edit it out. It's very dry in here.
We are in your apartment.
That's right. And that gets back to another part of the selling process. Over time, related to budget, your apartment, and I say this for my clients, there are some people who get to do this because they have the privilege of the finances and the wisdom and the taste and the age. But I think your house should reflect how you present yourself when you walk out the door.
Mm-hmm.
I live in New York City, so I don't walk out my door without making sure that hair and makeup is all covered. I want to make sure that however I exit, I'm representing myself the way I feel about myself.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, though. It's interesting that, your apartment is beautiful and you can tell that that's how you live your life. Absolutely. How is that translated even one step farther than, when you walk into a retail store, you're working with a customer or client? Do you feel like that has an impact in today's day and age?
Well, I think that people, their purchasing personality, that you can trademark that
Right.
if you want, is affected by their confidence, by how they live their lives outside of walking into a retail store. In other words, we've seen people that bring in all their psychological pathologies with them, and we've seen people who are just there for this sheer enjoyment of learning about what you have to offer them.
Right.
And I think that I have always worked in a kind of privileged place, where the product was beautiful, the prices were high, but not everybody who walked in the store was going to purchase something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the atmosphere you create has to be the same for that person as someone who's going to make a purchase. The purchaser doesn't need a lot of fluffing or soft peddling.
Right.
But I think people, when they walk into a retail store, have to be respected. I remember when little girls walked in, especially in Rodeo Drive, you could see some of them really made an effort. And I took samples of perfume and I put them in a little Valentino bag. And as they were walking out, I told one little girl one time, and it was more than one time, I said, when we had a contest today here at Valentino and you won the best dress for Rodeo Drive, and I handed her the package. Well, sometimes they just smiled and the moms or the dads just smiled. But I remember one lady said, no, you won the contest, because perhaps I was the first person that talked to that young lady.
Right.
Which brings up the old retail adage, you never know who the customer is when they walk in the door.
Mm-hmm.
So remembering that appearance and sizes, all those things have to be put into the right perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So back to the changes that we're experiencing in luxury retail. It sounds like, if I'm understanding correctly, like you have to adjust the way that you're working with clients, but the core principles, even just like the story about you're giving the perfume to little girls at Valentino, I would say is still so applicable to today's day and age in the retail environment.
Well, I think what's happened is the people that are selling the product, they get the staff, especially in things like cosmetics, they're inundated with product knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how you interpret it. And I think that it comes with, you have to have a self-confidence before you can start really promoting anything, whether it's mascara or a business suit. And that relates, I think, to men's as well. The client today is exceedingly well prepared for purchases. What I mean by that is they can tell right away who's clear, who's concise, who knows what they're talking about. When you start mentioning, many times you and I have walked into a store where they comment on your appearance or a bag you're carrying or whatever.
Of course.
Big turnoff. And some people, that's the last thing they want you to do is notice them. I think that it's much more appropriate to say welcome. I know that I've trained a lot of people, especially with Giorgio Armani. We have brand ambassadors that work in different department stores. Welcome to Giorgio Armani was always got a positive reaction. You usually got a thank you, as opposed to saying something about them, or the other death sentence is, may I help you?
I was going to ask you about that, actually.
The answer is no. You always want to make sure that any sentence you ask has a positive possibility.
Right, and there's not a simple no to stop the conversation. There's an extension of the conversation, let's say, as natural flow into how we converse as humans.
And getting back to your point about how the business has changed, because a lot of business has gone online, I think that people are hungry for the personal relationship. When a salesperson can look at a woman or a gentleman when they walk in, determine what their size is, that's key. Asking someone their size is the first error because it shows that you don't know what you're talking about. And then begin to find a piece that you see them in. That has been really the key to how I operated. It was always greeting the client, giving them some chance to move around. Very often, that was what worked, because most times people don't ask you for what they want or what they're looking for.
And I think you really honed in on something super important. I think you said, like when you said hungry, they're hungry for basically what the internet can't provide.
That's right, which is human contact.
Right, exactly. But on sales floors, I think we often forget this, right? In the sense of they made a cognizant decision to walk into the store, as opposed to, they can find the product online. Everyone knows they can find the product online. So even just that simple act, they're already, let's say, a portion there. To your point, I mean, they've already basically indicated that they have that hunger for service, for someone to assist them in a way that, e-commerce shopping or online shopping cannot.
Well, that's the whole point of creating trust and a relationship. You and I were talking about websites and how trust can be established in print and through photo. And someone could understand that they're looking at the website of an expert or not, or someone who's just beginning. And that was a great lesson for me. Because of doing it for such a long time and mentoring people, I had assistants, I had interns, and there was a lot of humor associated with those relationships. But the basics really are, I think, what today's customers are looking for, especially because of the online experience.
Sorry to interrupt you, but in that context, because you're mentoring people and there's new people coming into either the retail sales floor or the corporate office, when you're mentoring people, do you just train them on these core principles, or have you adjusted it slightly for the new digital age? Or
the first thing I like to do is understand what your information is. How I like to see how you operate. I watch you and see how you greet a customer and how you touch the clothes, and do you have the reverence for the product? That is something that comes naturally. How you put a garment on a person, how you help them with a coat, how you begin the process of not asking them if they'd like to try it on, but expressing that this is something they're going to enjoy. It's not like, do you want black or brown? These are the pieces that of a salesperson's technique that really can only be developed from their self-knowledge. But what I do is basically refine, the rough edges, and just get them to be comfortable about it. I think that the most fun of selling is the personal relationship that you have with someone. Obviously, some people are open and fun. Some people are a pill. Some people, it's a horrible, horrible experience that they have to go and buy something. They just don't like doing it. I've met a lot of men and women like that. How do you mitigate the circumstances? That's really been the fun of my career. I call it my practice.
Right. No, I love that. Okay, so just wrapping up here, because we've been having a great conversation, we've been talking for a little while. What is something that you look back on your career? It could be recent, it could be, from years ago, that you did something unique in the retail environment that, I don't know, led to a success. It doesn't have to be a business success or a great client, but something that you're proud of, that you deem to, wow, I'm really happy with how I handled that, or how it ended up, the outcome being.
I'm thinking. I mean, I think that I have a lot of positive ones. I'm just sort of stuttering for a second, just because I don't have one to come right to mind. But there's one great story that is rather recent. I was in as a Giorgio Armani employee. I was standing at Bergdorf Goodman, and a woman came in who had a slight. Her arm was in a sling. Something was going on there, and she sat down in an Armani chair in the Armani boutique, and she was looking for her alterations. And I watched 1, 2, 3 people come down the stairs from where she had purchased a few weeks before. She knew they were ready today. I think she was called for it, but no one could assist her. A Bergdorf Goodman. They couldn't find it. They weren't sure. Things that made the woman who had patience start to get a little flustered. So I walked up to her and I said, I don't work here. I work for Mr. Armani. I'm visiting, but I think I know maybe where these are. Can you just wait? So I went into the area where they're all kept, and there they were. I mean, it wasn't very hard. And I brought them out, and someone put them in a garment bag, because I'm happy to do it. But then as she was leaving, I realized she needed help. Mm-hmm. And I said, how are you getting out of here? Where are you going? She said, no, I'm fine. I said, no, I'm going to walk you to the door, which I did. And then I walked her to the cab. Well, a month later, not quite a month later, about 3 weeks later, she came back to the boutique and had a really nice time and made some very nice purchases. I actually forgot what I did. It was just a normal service aspect of what I would do working for Giorgio Armani. And I was quite pleased and actually grateful that she remembered. I got a nice letter for it and all that other stuff, but she came back and she made a purchase with her husband.
I love that story for so many ways, but also just because it honestly, it sums up what we've been talking about for the last period of time, in the sense of there's so much talk now about how much the industry has changed, and it has, with the introduction of online and the changing customer, and everything about the industry has changed. But that story right there could have been exactly the same 30 years ago, sure, as it is today, and with the same outcome.
And I think we have to be careful when we talk about the customer has changed, the business has changed. Yes, absolutely, mm-hmm, technology, mm-hmm, etc. But I think the basics are really the same.
Right.
I think I don't use that expression old school anymore, because I would say traditional school. The system that I think we have to use is just taking our communications, our eye contact, and finding out what you need, mm-hmm, and how can I enhance that.
It's almost the basics have become intensified.
Yes.
It's almost gone the opposite way, in the sense of the basics are more important now than ever.
Exactly. And there's something that I truly believe. I think every man, every woman knows what their taste is, knows what their style is. And I think it's just our job as salespeople to enhance that. Just give them more choices. Mm-hmm. And if you honestly believe that a choice a client made wasn't the best one, the answer, the comment is, I think we can do better. And they subtly know what you're saying.
Right.
Let's just take this up or go in just a different direction. But I think that people truthfully know what they like. They have a sense of what they can afford. And it's just a matter of you to translate the product to what their needs are.
That was a great summary, James. I thoroughly enjoyed, as always, talking with you about a topic that you and I are both super passionate about, and look forward to talking more about it sometime.